You think you know Fahrenheit 451? Think again. The director and lead actor hated each other so much that the star cut his own hair mid-scene to ruin continuity.
Everything all right?
Yes, everything's all right.
Truffaut spoke no English and directed through a translator. And the crew wore gas masks while burning real antique books on set, some of them Ray Bradbury's own works.
This sounds stupid. What temperature does book paper?
Today, we're exposing 14 hidden truths behind Fahrenheit 451, including the fire engine that nearly killed the crew, the experimental monorail that no longer exists, and the alleged sabotage attempt where the furious star tried to steal the master reels to stop the film from being released. Let's get into it. 1. No opening credits. Watch the beginning of Fahrenheit 451 again. Notice anything missing? There's no text anywhere. In a move of pure cinematic genius, director François Truffaut decided that a film about a totalitarian society that bans reading shouldn't have any written text on screen whatsoever. Fahrenheit 451 contains 0 opening credits. No title cards, no actor names, no production company logos, nothing. Instead, all the cast and crew information is spoken aloud by a narrator over abstract shots of television antennas sprouting from rooftops like a forest of surveillance. It's a brilliant piece of thematic consistency that most viewers don't even consciously notice. But it immediately signals that this is a world where the written word has been erased from public life. The decision was controversial. Studios hated it because it violated every convention of film marketing. Truffaut refused to compromise. He understood that form and content had to be unified. Putting text on screen in a movie about the death of literacy would have been a fundamental betrayal of the story's premise. 2. The war between director and star. The production of Fahrenheit 451 was an absolute battlefield. Director François Truffaut and lead actor Oscar Werner had fundamental, irreconcilable disagreements about how to play the protagonist Montag. Werner wanted to portray him as a heroic rebel secretly fighting the system from within. Truffaut insisted Montag should be a confused, passive cog in the fascist machine who only slowly awakens to the horror of what he's doing. The arguments became so bitter and personal that by the end of the shoot, Truffaut and Werner weren't speaking to each other at all. They communicated only through assistants and written notes. In an act of pure spite, Werner deliberately cut his own hair mid-production to create continuity errors that would be impossible to fix in editing. Truffaut had to either reshoot expensive scenes or live with visible mistakes in the final film. It's one of the most toxic actor-director relationships in cinema history. The tension shows on screen in Werner's performance, which feels genuinely uncomfortable and alienated. That wasn't entirely acting. 3. The dual roles secret. Julie Christie plays 2 completely different characters in Fahrenheit 451, Montag's conformist, television-addicted wife, Linda, and the rebellious freethinker Clarice, who awakens his conscience. Truffaut's original choice for Clarice was Jean Seberg, the American actress who had starred in his earlier films. The studio pushed for a bigger star to ensure international box office appeal. Truffaut eventually realized that having Christie play both roles was actually thematically brilliant. It symbolically suggested that every conformist has a hidden rebel inside them, and every rebel contains the seed of conformity. The 2 women represent opposing sides of human nature. By making them the same actress, Truffaut forces the audience to see them as mirrors of each other rather than opposites. It's a subtle piece of visual storytelling that elevates the film beyond simple dystopian allegory. What looked like studio compromise became genuine insight. 4. The fire engine from hell. The futuristic one-man fire engine that Montag drives is one of the most iconic vehicle designs in science fiction cinema. It was also a nightmare to actually operate. The vehicle was a custom-built prototype that was top-heavy, unstable, and notoriously difficult to steer safely. During one high-speed chase sequence, the brakes completely failed. The fire engine nearly crashed into a crowd of crew members standing just off camera. It was only stopped at the last second by emergency safety measures. Multiple people could have been killed or seriously injured. The stunt drivers who had to operate the vehicle hated it so much that they flat out refused to drive it faster than 15 miles per hour for the rest of production. Truffaut had to use camera tricks and editing to make the chase scenes look faster and more dangerous than they actually were. The fire engine looks amazing on screen. In real life, it was a death trap. 5. Ray Bradbury's Hidden Books author Ray Bradbury, who wrote the original novel, was heavily involved in the production design. He personally selected many of the books that were burned on screen. If you look closely at the piles of literature being incinerated during the book-burning sequences, you can spot copies of Bradbury's own works, including The Martian Chronicles and The Illustrated Man, being turned to ash. It was a deliberate meta-commentary on censorship and artistic destruction. Bradbury literally watching his own creations burn as a symbolic statement about how easily culture can be erased. The image of Bradbury's books in the flames is haunting and deeply personal. This wasn't just theoretical horror for him, it was a nightmare made literal. He later said watching his own books burn on set was one of the most emotionally difficult experiences of his career, even though he knew it was fake and necessary for the film. 6. The monorail that no longer exists. The futuristic suspended monorail that appears throughout Fahrenheit 451 wasn't a set piece or a miniature model. It was a real experimental transportation system called the Sabotag monorail, located in Châteauneuf-sur-Loire, France. Truffaut chose it because it looked like transportation from a dream, something otherworldly and utopian that perfectly matched the film's vision of a sterile, controlled future. But the Sabotag line was a commercial failure. It was dismantled shortly after filming finished. Fahrenheit 451 is now one of the only historical records of this failed technology. The monorail exists now only in this film, a ghost of an optimistic future that never materialized. It's a perfect metaphor for the movie itself, a vision of tomorrow that's simultaneously beautiful and deeply wrong, a utopia that's actually a prison. 7. So Hitchcock's composer Fahrenheit 451 was François Truffaut's first English-language film and his first film shot in color. He was terrified of failing. At the time, Truffaut was obsessed with Alfred Hitchcock and had just published a famous book-length interview with the master of suspense. To help ground himself in unfamiliar territory, Truffaut hired Hitchcock's legendary composer Bernard Herrmann to write the score. Herrmann created a cold, some mechanical sound using only string and percussion instruments, deliberately avoiding any warm or organic tones. The music mimics a heartbeat, steady, relentless, inhuman. It represents the mechanical efficiency of the firemen as they destroy human culture. Herrmann's score is one of his greatest works. It's inseparable from the film's atmosphere of creeping dread and emotional numbness. Without Herrmann, Fahrenheit 451 would lose half its power. 8. Real books. Real fire. To achieve the most realistic and emotionally devastating shots of burning literature, Truffaut insisted on using real vintage books rather than props or reproductions. The production bought or borrowed hundreds of actual antique books from the 19th and early 20th centuries and set them on fire on camera. The smell of burning paper on the soundstage was so thick and toxic that the crew had to wear gas masks between takes to avoid respiratory damage. Several local bookstores in London and Paris reportedly refused to sell to the production when they discovered what the books were being used for. They viewed it as a form of cultural vandalism, even if it was for artistic purposes. Watching actual history and literature reduced to ash wasn't just acting. It was a real loss that everyone could feel. That authentic grief shows in the performances during the burning scenes. 9. On the firemen training. The actors playing the firemen were sent to a real fire academy in London for professional training. But instead of learning how to extinguish fires, they were taught how to use high-pressure flamethrowers to incinerate materials as quickly and artistically as possible. The training was bizarre and disturbing. Firefighters who had spent their careers saving lives and property were now teaching actors how to destroy books with maximum efficiency. The actors had to learn proper safety protocols, how to control the flame spread, and how to create visually dramatic burns that would look good on camera. It was a complete inversion of what firefighting is supposed to be. Several of the professional firefighters who served as instructors later said they were deeply uncomfortable with the assignment. The training gave the actors a disturbing competence with the flamethrowers. It makes their book-burning scenes feel genuinely menacing rather than theatrical. 10. The language barrier. François Truffaut spoke very little English during the production of Fahrenheit 451. He directed the entire English-speaking cast through a translator. This created massive communication problems and misunderstandings. But Truffaut eventually realized the language barrier was actually helping the film. The sense of detachment and miscommunication in the performances, the way characters seemed slightly disconnected from each other and from their own emotions, was partially a result of the actors not being able to communicate directly with their director. Truffaut decided to embrace this alienation effect. It made the characters feel more like the emotionless, zombie-like citizens of Bradbury's dystopia. The performances in Fahrenheit 451 have a strange, stilted quality that works perfectly for a society where genuine human connection has been replaced by television and propaganda. What should have been a production disaster became an accidental artistic triumph. 11. The book people were actually crying. The final scene in the snow, where the book people recite their memorized texts while walking through a frozen forest, is one of the most emotionally powerful sequences in the film. The emotion visible on the actors' faces wasn't entirely performed. It was filmed during a brutally cold winter. The actors had spent weeks actually memorizing entire chapters of real literature to prepare for their roles. They weren't just reciting lines from a script, and they were performing Dickens, Poe, Plato, works they had genuinely committed to memory as if civilization had already ended. The feeling of preserving human culture through memory became so intense and personal that many of the actors broke down in tears when the cameras stopped rolling. They felt like they were actually participating in the act of resistance the film depicted. That emotional truth radiates from the screen. It's one of the most genuine moments in a film filled with artifice and alienation. 12. Predicting flat screens and social media. In 1966, most people still had bulky, convex television sets no larger than a suitcase. Fahrenheit 451 accurately predicted the rise of giant, wall-sized flat-screen televisions that would dominate living spaces and consume people's attention. But the film goes even further. It shows Linda interacting with the people on her screen as if they were her real family, responding to pre-programmed prompts, participating in scripted conversations with television personalities. This is now recognized as a direct prediction of modern social media, parasocial relationships, and the illusion of intimacy created by digital communication. Bradbury and Truffaut understood that future technology wouldn't just entertain people. It would replace genuine human connection with artificial substitutes that feel real but are completely hollow. Watching Fahrenheit 451 today is eerie. The dystopia it depicts is uncomfortably close to the world we actually live in. 13. The Uniform Censorship Fahrenheit 451 faced an unusual form of censorship regarding its depiction of authority. While censors had no problem with the book-burning sequences, they were terrified that the firemen's uniforms looked too similar to real police or military gear of the mid-1960s. This was during the height of civil unrest, protests, and clashes between citizens and law enforcement across Europe and America. Censors feared audiences would consciously or subconsciously associate the film's thought police with actual government authorities. They pressured Truffaut to make the uniforms look more theatrical, more obviously fictional, less grounded in reality. Truffaut partially complied by adding futuristic helmets and design elements, but he refused to completely abandon the militaristic aesthetic. He wanted the firemen to look like plausible extensions of real-world authoritarianism, not cartoon villains, because the whole point of the film was to warn that fascism doesn't announce itself. It arrives in familiar uniforms and reasonable justifications. 14. The final edit Sabotage. The feud didn't end when filming wrapped. There's a persistent legend that Oscar Werner, still furious at François Truffaut, attempted to steal the master reels containing the film's climactic scenes. Werner believed his performance had been deliberately sabotaged in the editing room, that Truffaut had used unflattering takes and cut around his best moments out of pure spite. He allegedly planned to take the reels to prevent the film from being finished, or to force Truffaut to re-edit the ending with Werner supervising. Werner never succeeded in actually stealing the footage. But the threat was serious enough that Truffaut hired 24-hour armed security to guard the editing room until the final print was completed and shipped to the studio. It's one of the most extreme examples of actor-director animosity in film history. It's a miracle the film was completed at all. Werner never worked with Truffaut again. He later called Fahrenheit 451 the worst experience of his professional life. Given how he behaved, Truffaut probably agreed. So, if books were banned tomorrow and you could only save one by memorizing it, which would you choose? If you want more deep dives into the films that saw the future coming, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments if you caught the no-text opening credits before I mentioned it. See you in the next one.